So Irma, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. In 2003, I ran a workshop on Leonard Bernstein. And at that time, I contacted the family, and Jamie and Nina and Alex were gracious enough to give me lots of personal information and invite me to a memorial in their father's honor. So when I was teaching the workshop this year, I wrote to the family and I asked if one of them would like to join us and give us a personal take on their dad. Nina graciously offered to join us, and I'm thrilled to introduce her to you now. Nina Bernstein Simmons.
Hi, everyone. I'm amazed there are so many of you, 70 people, Lordy. I'm very touched. And thank you, Irma, and thank you, Saul, who very graciously helped me with this slideshow, because I am not particularly technologically savvy. And I come by that very honestly, because my father never touched a machine but broke it. So, and that went where, you know, he would get sent the most expensive, fancy stereo equipment, just absolute smithereens in 2 days. So, but I think this is going to work. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, right?
Yes.
And I do slideshow, and I do from beginning, and there we have it. I don't know if you are all familiar with this caricature, this Hirschfeld, but it's a beauty, and I think it perfectly captures what a miracle of a human being my father was. He could do it all. There was really nothing except maybe operate machinery that he couldn't do. You see it all here. It's the conducting, obviously, and the phone and the typewriter, because he was, of course, busy writing scripts for young people's concerts and omnibus. The piano, the manuscript, it's all going on. And I'm going to advance this. This is a great shot. This is, you know, center of attention all the time, magnet, people magnet. And especially, he couldn't resist sitting at the piano, and you know, whether he was alone, but preferably surrounded by people and other musicians and singers. And this is just who he was. And he couldn't get enough of people. People couldn't get enough of him. It was a totally two-way love affair. This is a great conducting shot in rehearsal. I had that sweatshirt for a while, and I don't know what happened to it. I feel very bad about that. But he had the Mahler Society in Austria made, like, obviously that, and also bumper stickers, one of which said Mahler Grooves. And the Mahler Grooves bumper sticker ended up on his conducting score of Mahler Sixth. And that resides at the New York Philharmonic Archives, which is rather cool. Composing. That's his studio in, I'm going to go on a limb and say that's the Park Avenue apartment where I grew up. It could be earlier and could be the Osborne on 57th Street. But in any case, it's impossible to know what that score is in front of him. But that's where he would sit and compose. And a lot of times you would find him lying on the sofa in his studio, seemingly asleep, but he wasn't asleep. He was actually composing. He was getting in that trance-like state where ideas would come. And then he would get up and go to the piano and jot them down. And here is, of course, surrounded by children who were just as taken with him as adults, because he was really good with kids. He loved them. And he had a way of speaking to them that was never condescending, really took them seriously as equal human beings. And I think kids always appreciate that. So here's a CD of two of his symphonies, Jeremiah and Age of Anxiety. Age of Anxiety, I mean, you guys know this, is not quite a symphony so much as a piano concerto, but he called it a symphony, so okay, we're gonna take it. Also on the CD, interestingly, is a song cycle called I Hate Music. I don't know if you covered that in your workshop, but it's interesting to note that the evening before the famous 1943 debut, where he stepped in for Bruno Walter on short notice, the greatest thing to happen to him in his life to date was the opening of I Hate Music. The night, it was the night before on November 13th, 1943. Wow, I had a piece premiere and it was exciting. And his parents were there and his brother was there. And there was an enormous party and everybody got a little trashed. And he went home and fell into a deep sleep and the phone rang at 9, waking him up with this impossible news that he was going to have to go on. And he had to wake himself up in a big hurry, went down to the Carnegie. He was living in Carnegie Hall as it happened. He had one of those rooms. I don't think they exist anymore, all the way at the top. And so he went down to the Carnegie Deli or the coffee shop and had interminable cups of coffee, and the pharmacist, who was his pal, gave him 2 pills. He said, this one will perk you up and this other one will calm you down. Take them 15 minutes before showtime. So he kept them in his pocket and he's standing in the wings in a state of, I can't even imagine, paralysis and terror. And he looks at these pills and he throws them across into oblivion. And I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this my own self, and no pill is gonna help me. And as we all know, he did. Boy, did he. In his spare time, he wrote books. Here, this is the first one, Joy of Music. And it has such fun essays such as, whatever happened to that great American symphony? And why don't you run upstairs and write a nice Gershwin tune? And subjects like that. It also has his omnibus script for the very first TV show that he did, where he painted the score of the first page of Beethoven's Fifth on the floor. Have you all seen that? Yeah. So that script is here, The World of Jazz, Art of Conducting, etc. There were several books after that because he couldn't stop doing what he was doing. And then there was time in the busy schedule to get married and have a family. Here's my absolutely gorgeous mother. She was from Chile. She was funny. She was a little wicked in places, and absolutely gorgeously beautiful. By the way, do you know about the biopic that's being made at the moment? My dad is going to be played by Bradley Cooper. And we all said, Bradley Cooper, are you nuts? But it turns out that he is quite the shapeshifter. He can, especially with a good makeup artist, we've seen some makeup tests. It's astonishing, actually. And he's in the movie, he will be my dad at 3 different ages. He will do you can see the Philharmonic debut. So he'll be that age, then he'll be this age, which I think is the most successful makeup and hair job. And then he'll be an old man. So lots to look forward to there. My mom is going to be played by Carey Mulligan. I don't know if you all know who that actress is. She's remarkable, very, very beautiful. She's an English actress. And actually, my mother spoke English with a bit of an English accent. So it's a fortuitous choice. She's going to be magnificent. I think she'll walk away with the movie, personally. So first came Jamie. And this is a very cute shot. She's sitting on the piano. This makes me laugh because it's so obviously staged. I don't know that, I never saw my parents play chess in my life, much less with one of us there looking on. This is, and you can see my mother's expression. She's just barely holding it together because it's all so silly. Then came Alexander, who at first looked a little froggy, as you can see, but he turned out to be a very handsome man. Yucking it up. That's an actual genuine laugh. Okay, that's not staged for anybody. And there's me on my mom's lap. This is our house in Connecticut. And, you know, you see Leonard Bernstein relaxing. I don't know how he had time to do that. And yet, he did from time to time. That's me when I was about 6 or 7. I remember this photo session. He was giving an interview, and he didn't mind that I sat on his lap and drank my soda. He was just really tolerant that way. Handsome guy. This is in Italy, where we went one summer. And what more can I say about that? I had a great time. Nobody else did. But I liked that summer very much. I love this. That's also that summer in Italy. It was hot. People were a little cranky. It's a really beautiful, pensive shot. And there's Jamie and Alexander with the Beatles. Now, the Beatles came into our lives because Jamie, obviously, she was like the ground zero teen for American consumption of the Beatles. She just, you know, it's hard to be objective about how much the Beatles meant to her. And so she would play the records for our dad, and he thought they were terrific, absolutely terrific. And in fact, went on to use some of the songs in his young people's concert to illustrate certain points. Like, for instance, he goes to the piano and he sings "And I Love Her" to illustrate sonata form. And well, that's the other thing he couldn't do, sing. He was absolutely hopeless as a vocalist, and knew it. It didn't keep him from doing it, but it was not very pretty. And he would, in fact, use a lot of pop music in his young people's concerts. The Kinks, "You Really Got Me," The Association, "Along Comes Mary," are just a few that come to mind. And of course, it was a stroke of genius because the kids in the audience, they could relate to that. They can, so to apply the kinks in a discussion of Brahms, say, is kind of a masterstroke. And the kids loved it. This is the 5 of us in, where were we again? In Austria. And we had just, it was the, why can't I think of the name of the festival anymore? So it's so famous. Anyway, he had just done Mahler 8th and Symphony of 1,000. It was humongous, very, very wonderful. And I don't remember where we were, but we were dressed to the nines. This thing I was wearing was a long dirndl. I was very proud of it. It was extremely fancy. We moved to the Dakota in 75, and that unfortunately is where he died in 90. My mother was brilliant at creating very warm, inviting environments. And this was our library there. And the harpsichord was a present to our dad, and I can't remember from whom, but it served as the, I guess you would call it the palette for the room. And you can just see how warm and inviting the space was. There's Daddy and Jamie having a sledding fest in Central Park. Again, it's hard to know how he had time to do that. That's us in Connecticut. I remember we were laughing because my mother lost her shoe while running. Oh, this is good. In 1971, my dad had a performance of Bach's Magnificat at the Vatican. And we all went, and we had an audience with the Pope. Yes, we did. And, you know, I looked like a proper little Jewish communion girl. And my mother obviously knew how to dress. The lady on my left there, that was our nanny. Her name was Julia Vega. She was Chilean and possibly the most Catholic person ever born. So for her, this was beyond the beyond to be meeting His Holiness the Pope. Daddy doesn't look too uncomfortable. Jamie's a little over the top. And Alexander with the hippie hair, you know, I'm sure there had to have been a discussion of, will you cut your hair? It's the Pope. And he wouldn't have it. So there it is, very much a snapshot of 1970. Did I say 71? I guess it was 73. Yeah, very much a 1973 time capsule shot. Speaking of extraordinary people, you know, when you think of all of the crowned heads of Europe, popes and presidents that I was able to meet over the course of many years, it really does boggle. I mean, I did meet Queen Elizabeth and her retinue, and President Carter, and other presidents. No, not Reagan, definitely not Reagan. All right, so the shows, this was the first one, of course. Betty Condon and Adolph Green were so central to our lives. Adolf was my godfather, and Betty and Adolf, it just, you can't, it all comes out as one word, Betty and Adolf. And, you know, much to Phyllis Green's dismay, because she was actually married to Adolf, but you never said Phyllis and Adolf quite the same way that you said Betty and Adolf. They were such a unit, and we adored them. Adolf Green was an unrepeatable human being. He was a true original and a genius of a unique genius. I don't know how to describe it, the way his mind would work. And the quality of goofiness that they brought to this show was just delicious. I don't know if anybody got to see the revival a number of years ago. That was choreographed by Josh Bergasse. It was a knockout. So now here's the film of On the Town. Yeah, Frank Sinatra and Gene Kelly and all that. And yet only a handful of the songs from the original show. It turned out that Louis B. Mayer really did not like the score of On the Town. He found the ballet music much too not accessible enough. He thought, he called it all of that Prokofiev crap. And so he enlisted the help of Roger Edens, I believe was his name, to write other songs. And I believe that Betty and Adolf worked with Roger Edens to write new lyrics to those new songs. And you would think that my father would feel tremendously betrayed by that, that they didn't go to bat for the original score and advocate for him, and much less to go off and collaborate with this whole other person. But he totally forgave them, which I think was tremendously big-hearted of him. Wonderful Town came along in '52. It was written in record time. And my father used to put it that, well, he had a baby on the way and she was going to need shoes one day. So he had to write this show. It's a charmer. It doesn't get revived very often. I think the last time was back in the 90s with Donna, oh, I'm going to forget her name.
Murphy, Donna Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Donna Murphy. And that was a terrific production. I really enjoyed that. I hope it comes around again. It's a very nostalgic show about the 30s in New York, in the village, a lot of village types, bohemians and such. Here's my mom and dad singing what would it have been? Maybe Wonderful Town, maybe Trouble in Tahiti. Not sure. But she would sing along with him when he'd written something new. Oh, it might have been Candide, actually. That's possible. So here's the big one, about which I will say only that we anticipate this new movie by Spielberg with such excitement. And we've seen it. It's sensational. And you must go see it when it comes out in the theater, if possible, if you can manage it. Because it's masterful, it's huge, and it's colorful and it's moving and all of the things that that you know this show can be. And the score is conducted by Gustavo Dudamel, and it's the New York Philharmonic. So it really, it has never sounded better. It's an absolute knockout. So excited. Here's the team. That is a very young Stephen Sondheim on the left. There is Arthur Lawrence. There is Hal Prince in the back. My dad, Jerome Robbins, and I haven't done my homework and don't know who the seated gentleman is. Maybe Roger Griffiths, another of the producers. What a team. They like to say that the show succeeded because they were all writing the same show. And that doesn't always happen. I don't know though, because my dad wrote a lot of music that got cut, and their objections were that it was too operatic and that this wasn't a damn opera. A Boy Like That and I Have a Love was much longer. Now I don't know what got cut from it. I would love to hear what they got rid of, but I think ultimately they made the right choice, because what we do have of that number is, I think it's perfect. Candide. The amazing thing about Candide is that it was being written at the same time as West Side Story. And if you know the show Candide, contemplate having those two musical worlds occupying your brain at the same time. It really boggles me anyway. And as different as those two shows were, there was some cross-pollination, and there are a couple of things. One Hand, One Heart started out in Candide, and Krupke, incredibly enough, started out in Candide. Where does it get you in the end? In the end, interestingly. Candide may be my favorite of all my dad's shows, particularly since there's never a definitive version of it. It's always fun to go see a new production because, well, you never know what you're gonna get. You know, will this number be in the first act or the second act? Will the old lady get to do her long monologue? Will there be an El Dorado? Will there be, fill in the blank? It's just, there are about 4 official versions that you can get. You can choose among them. Choose your adventure. So he's a very famous man. That's all I wanted to say with this slide. He was on the cover of Time, Newsweek. It was constant. There was, whenever you would look at the arts and leisure section of a Sunday, you could absolutely predict that his name would be in there multiple times. That was a fact of life for a long, long time. I hope, Irma, maybe you can pitch this to me in the Q&A. Ask me when I first knew how famous my father was, and I will tell you. Lots and lots of concerts, benefit concerts, concerts for peace, concerts for amnesty. He was very politically minded, always involved in social justice projects and Israel, human rights. And of course, the notorious Black Panthers event. This really was not his event at all. It was my mother's. She was working to raise money for legal aid for the Panther 21. These were 21 gentlemen who were rounded up on trumped up charges. And for her efforts, she was publicly lambasted. My sister says that in her view, she was never all the way to happy ever again. And I think that's true. I think her mortification was total. And what did Tom Wolfe ever do for the world? That's what I'd like to know. He ruined my mother's life. And you know, he wasn't even invited to the thing. He snuck in. Yep. Yep. There's our dear friend, J. Edgar. He had a fat file on my dad. He had I think it was 800 pages ultimately, and started early. I think it started back in the 30s and 40s, because my dad was a softie, and if someone asked him to lend his name to a cause, of course he was going to lend his name to the cause. But certain administrations thought that was very suspicious, and they kept files on him. So this is a shot of him composing Mass. I don't know if you had a chance to look at Mass, but it's a what we like to call a monster piece. It's a big, sprawling, insanely eclectic melting pot of a piece. Can't call it a show, although it is, you know, subtitled a theater piece for singers, players, and dancers, I think it is. Commissioned by and for the Kennedy Center by that lady. Originally, she had called and asked if if my dad would serve as the general manager, as the administrative head of the Kennedy Center. And this was just not ever going to be possible, because that was not that's not where his strengths lie. He's not a businessman, he's an artist. So my mom convinced him to say no, and instead ask if he could write a piece for the inaugural performance. And so he did, and that is it. I was 10 when this piece was written, and I have a very strong connection with it. I used to sit and play the record over and over and over, and friends would come over after school, and I'd make them listen to Mass, and I don't know what they made of it, but yeah, I was very close to it. So going back in time a bit, this is 48 in Jerusalem, and my father, of course, being there for the creation of the state of Israel, was tremendously involved and part of it all. And here's a photo of him playing at Beersheba. You can see this soldiers up on the walls. I love this shot. Pretty sure he was doing Rhapsody in Blue. Here he is in Vienna. where he had a rocky beginning at first. I think he went too soon after the end of the war, and he wasn't entirely sure how he felt about being there, or how they felt about him being there. But eventually he grew to be the toast of Vienna and went there just about every year to conduct operas and symphonies, even his own. And he took a quiet place there. And that was controversial for sure. But ultimately, you know, when it came to going to places that were associated with anti-Semitism, he felt that the music really came first. And that music had the power to unite where people had differences. And I think that's been borne out. I think he was totally right. He was a cultural ambassador of a kind. Whenever he traveled with the Philharmonic, they would travel all over the world. My brother went with him once to Japan and to Australia. I went with him to Japan. They went berserk for him there. He would go to South America, and famously he was in South America at the same time that Nixon was. And I don't believe they crossed paths, but as far as cultural ambassadorship goes, I think Bernstein had the upper hand there. Yeah, there he is in Japan, learning what does it say? Performance of Gagaku. And then, of course, he was there when the wall came down, and he conducted the, here he is chipping away at the wall. And do we have, no. He was there and he did the Ode to Freedom concert with members of several orchestras, including the New York Philharmonic, the London Symphony, I believe the Israeli Philharmonic sent members, as well as the West German Radio Orchestra, maybe the East German Orchestra as well, I can't remember. But that was a very moving time. I foolishly did not go. He invited me to go and I didn't go. I forget why. I wish I had been there. And that, I believe, is our final slide. Loved that man. There'll never be another like him. So we can open him up to Q&A if you like.
Okay, so we have a question. No, this is a comment from one of the members. During certain time periods of Hoover, it was an honor to have him have a file on you. He was an evil man.
Yes, indeed.
That's the only comment in the chat, but we can
really?
open it up to anyone. If you
Nina.
want to, do you want to stop sharing, Nina?
Yeah, I'll stop.
Okay, there you go.
Nina asked me to please ask her when she found out, what was the time that she found out that her father was famous?
Yeah. It was when Wilma Flintstone turned to Betty Rubble and told her, we mustn't be late to the Holly Rock Bowl. I love to watch Leonard Bernstein conduct. It's a true thing. I mean, you can't, it's, you know, wow, he's on the Flintstones. That must mean he's really famous.
Do we have any questions from anyone? If they want to raise their virtual hand or unmute themselves one at a time?
I have two others, and then I'm sure other people are going to ask other questions. The name of the movie. You didn't mention the name of the movie about your dad.
Oh, at the moment, its working title is Maestro. It's pretty straightforward.
And my other question was, do you see much of Stephen Sondheim?
It's hard to in COVID times, but pre-pandemic, yeah, we would gather for a friendly game of anagrams from time to time, of which he is the master. And he's also a tremendously funny guy. He's very, very quick-witted, not surprising. Love that, love him. And I saw him the other night because I went to the opening of Assassins at Classic Stage Company, and he was there looking pretty old and frail. Oh, I couldn't believe it. That's not what Steve looks like.
Yeah.
Old man.
We have a few hands up, so I'm going to start with Karen. She was the first. You can go ahead and unmute, Karen.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. For 30 years, I had an uncle who was a percussionist with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. In fact, the last time I was at Tanglewood, I believe you.
Nick Firth?
No, Arthur Press.
Arthur Press, I remember him, sure.
Yeah. And he spoke of Leonard Bernstein often, but also the last time I was there, just before the pandemic, were you there, or was it, there was a film he shown about the young people's concerts. There was a lovely, it had to have been like the summer of 2019. And I know, I thought that was you, but I may be mistaken.
It might have
Was it your,
been
perhaps
my
a sibling?
sister, yeah.
Yes, okay. And I'm just wondering if he had a special relationship with the Boston Symphony, or it was just one of, many orchestras that
Well,
he guest
of course it
conducted.
was special because he grew up in Boston.
Okay.
And his very, very first orchestra experience, I mean, going to Symphony Hall was, that's where he heard Bolero for the first time and knocked his socks off. So obviously, and the early summers at Tanglewood, first summer at Tanglewood, 1940, and Kusevitsky was his mentor. So yeah, he's very steeped in all of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Robert Lang, if you want to unmute.
Okay. Hi, Nina.
Hi.
Back some years ago, I was in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, and I visited your father's grave. I was wondering, how did he come to be buried there? Was that his choice?
No, you couldn't get him to discuss such matters. It just it didn't. He couldn't deal with it. It took some doing to get him to make a will. He was just so about life that he just couldn't bring himself to discuss it. So it was his manager, Harry Kraut, who had been born in Brooklyn and knew of Greenwood, who made the arrangements. And we're awfully glad he did. It's beautiful there.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And thank you for
Okay,
visiting.
Ron.
I recommend it on a warm day if you want to go take a walk. It's just gorgeous there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Ron Hollander, go ahead.
Hi, Nina.
Hey, Ron.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for coming and for sharing. I love the intimate family pictures. I guess I was lucky enough. I remember standing the last row of Carnegie, and all of the early concerts, and all of the hubbub was that your father would conduct without a baton. And this was sort of a, sacrilegious thing that he would do that.
Unorthodox for sure.
Yes, unorthodox. But I wanted to ask you something really. I mean, to have a genius as a father and a genius in so many areas and so involved and so on. What was he like, if you want to talk about it, as a daddy? I mean, was he at school shows? Did he tuck you in at night? Did he
Tucking
teach
in,
you to
no.
ride a
Not-
bike?
No tucking in, no game of catch, but you know, you would find your moments. So if there a car ride, for example, if you got to ride with daddy alone, well, of course you were risking your life, because he was a notoriously dangerous driver. But that was quality time. And you would listen to the radio. He'd say, I want to catch up. He'd mean catch up on the pop music of the day. But by the time I was old enough to catch up with daddy, the music of the day was garbage. So the 70s, you know, it didn't have quite the pop that the 60s had. But yeah, he was a yummy dad, and, you know, bone crushing hugs and little poems slipped under your door at night, you know, just adorable.
Did you in some way feel the absence, because people with more conventional fathers were doing those things and taking them to school and, you know, showing up at the PTA?
I guess, but then he would do something like show up for the Christmas assembly, because my school had a father's chorus. And so he would show up for that. And, you know, everybody was very flustered and agitated about it all. But he'd show up. Come on, it's Menchie.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Mike Dolber, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. This has been great.
Sure.
I wrote this in the chat, but I don't like the way the question was worded, so I just wanted to say it.
Okay.
West Side Story is my all-time favorite. How did it happen that he came to do that? How did that all take place?
Oh, wow. It has a very long genesis. Arthur Lawrence, no, it was initially Jerry Robbins' idea of updating Romeo and Juliet, but its first incarnation was that took place on the Lower East Side, and it was Jews and Christians over the Passover and Easter intersecting.
Interesting.
But that wasn't musically inspiring, and so they shelved it. And it wasn't until maybe a year or so later, don't know what the timeline is, but that my dad and Arthur Lawrence found themselves in LA at the same time, and they were having lunch, I guess. And there was a newspaper there, and there were stories of gang clashes, Latino gangs and American gangs. And they thought, wow, gee, maybe this is the thing. And yeah, I can see how the music, there'd be jazz for the white kids, and there'd be hot Latin rhythms and in opposition and so forth. And they were off to the races.
Well, it worked. Okay, one other quick thing. Between 75 and 80, when you were at the Dakota, did he know, or you know John Lennon when they lived there?
Yeah, well, we met him once, maybe more, but one time that I can absolutely remember. Every October, the Dakota has a courtyard potluck. And they were there. We were beside ourselves. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Lennon wrote a couple books of poetry.
Yes.
Okay. And I forget which one it it's in, but there was a little poem called Moldy Man. And here's how it goes. I'm a moldy, moldy man. I'm moldy through and through. I'm a moldy, moldy man, though you may not think it true. I am moldy to my eyeballs. I am moldy to my toes, but I will not dance. I shy balls. I'm such a humble Joe. Okay, so my father thought it would be fun to try, and try is the operative word because you could not succeed in this game. The game was everybody, it's a round. So person A begins, I'm a moldy, moldy man. And person B has to follow person A and sing what they just sang, and also listen for the next thing that they're going to sing, and so forth and so forth. And it's a train wreck pretty much instantly, but it's a game that we like to play. Anyway, we're at this courtyard party and Daddy decides he wants to show Moldy Man to John Lennon, and we beg him not to put us in this impossible position, but he insists. And I don't know that John Lennon was too impressed, but it did get us to meet him.
That's great. Thank you. It's a great
Sure.
story. Thanks.
Okay, we have Abe, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I remember seeing him at a Tanglewood rehearsal,
Mhm.
and
The Saturday morning
A num-
rehearsals.
I'm sorry, and a number of other conductors in the rehearsals, they wanted the first dozen rows empty.
Mhm.
They didn't want the people that close. But apropos of one of the first pictures you showed where he's at the piano, your father,
Come in,
and he's
come in.
intimately surrounded by other people. You could I sat in the first row. He comes out with his cape, and I thought it was an affectation, but then later I found out it was the Kusevitsky cape. So that made it okay.
But he wouldn't have
And he-
worn the cape to rehearsal. No, the cape was strictly for concert attire.
Oh, because well, he had a cape and he whipped it off very theatrically. A grand
For
entrance.
rehearsal? I find
Yeah.
that hard to believe.
I
Okay.
was there. It was funny. And he didn't mind that we were practically on his backs and we could hear the comments he made to the orchestra. It was one of the highlights of my musical life.
Oh. Did I or my siblings play musical instruments as children? Well, what a good question. It didn't take. We all had piano lessons. We all tried valiantly and failed spectacularly. That's that story. A few years ago, I forget how the complete Mozart sonatas ended up on our piano at our family apartment uptown. And so my sister and I were there and we said, you want to just try, I'll take the right hand, you take the left hand. We'll go very, very slowly. We'll go from Kershaw 1, okay? I mean, this is like, he was 6 when he wrote this thing. And we're weeping with laughter because of the disaster that this was. It's just absolutely impossible. Forget it, never gonna happen. My sister actually taught herself the guitar. Did any of you read her book? Oh, you should all read her book. It's pretty great. It's a memoir. It's called Famous Father Girl, Jamie Bernstein. Anyway.
Mentioned it to the group. I did. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty great, right?
I loved it. I just loved it. It was so intimate and
Yeah.
you just really got to know both of them, all of you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty successful that way. Anyway, she taught herself the guitar and was a singer-songwriter for many years. So of the three of us, yeah, she made the best shot of it. She wrote some very terrific songs, but I mean, can you imagine trying to make it as a musician, as a child of that whirling dervish? Not going to happen.
You know, we have Anne who has a question. She has her hand up. Anne, you want to unmute? Oh, you're unmuted. There you go.
Yeah, I was getting ready. So thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Sure.
I was wondering, and I put my question on the
I see it. I
screen there,
see
but
it.
it didn't make any sense either. So I'm asking it. I was just wondering about your father was so energetic and effervescent, and what was it like for him to age
He was
and to
not,
begin losing?
he was horrified by it.
Ah.
He felt that, well, he wasn't particularly kind to his body. So when his body betrayed him, that was, you know, well, what did you think was going to happen? And it seemed precipitous to us. Certainly, when our mom died in '78, that was a cataclysm that aged him a lot quickly. And I mean, I don't know that he ever really recovered from that. But yeah, I mean, he bounced back to a certain degree, but time was not on his side. Yeah, it was tough.
I'm
Hey,
sorry to
Jay.
hear it. Thank you.
Sure.
Jay, if you want to ask your question.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Very endearing
Thanks for having
story
me.
about your dad. Could you tell us some little known factoid about your dad that showed his real character?
Wow. Factoid.
Or something about him and what he did?
Insomniac.
Huh.
Terrible insomniac, because he couldn't turn the mind off. And so, but he was also most productive in those nighttime hours because there were no ringing telephones and giggling children. And so he got a lot of score studying done, and he got a lot of composing done. He hated being alone, but he had to be alone to compose, so that was very difficult for him. It was always a struggle. And he also spent a lot of time in those wee hours of mornings doing those very, very difficult British crossword puzzles. He subscribed to the Manchester Guardian and the BBC Listener. Those puzzles were devilish and clever, and he and Steve Sondheim used to compete for who could finish them faster. So so that occupied his mind when he couldn't sleep.
Thank you.
Sure.
And you can go ahead. Anne?
Oh,
have your hand up?
I thought you said Ken.
Oh, sorry.
How did you feel, I don't want to say personally, deal with the fact that it was easy to be overshadowed your life? That's not real clear because I had some medical problems. How did you deal with the fact that you could easily be overshadowed by such a great man?
Well, I never knew any other state of existence. So that was life.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way things were. And
So it was, go ahead.
Well, and none of us was ambitious to be public figures. I mean, I was an actress for many years, but I didn't have insatiable ambition to be in the public sphere. So it wasn't really, it's not really a thing.
Okay, thank you.
Sue and Bob?
Yes, I wanted to say he was a real humanitarian, and I'm wondering if that affected you in your life in terms of the choices you made in your profession, in what you do. Were you influenced by that area of his personality, his humanitarian nature?
Yeah, well, you couldn't help but be influenced by that, and since my mother also was such fighters for social justice. For about 10 years, I taught underserved communities cooking. I taught children mainly in NYCHA public housing about healthy eating and preparing simple but tasty food. So I guess you can say that, yeah.
I have a comment. Oh, go ahead, Susan. Were you
No, I
finished?
just wanted to say that what you did was so incredibly important, because I taught in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and the kids had a real need for things like learning about nutrition, as did the parents. And many times if the parents were out to lunch in one way or another, the kids would have to cook for themselves. I mean, I had a 4th grader who was taking care of 3 younger brothers and sisters because the mom was out of the house most of the time. So
did they have a working stove? Because a lot of times they didn't have that.
Well, they did, but she had to feed them. And so she taught herself how to cook. So that was such an important thing in the 70s, that was the crack epidemic.
Right.
So a lot of parents were unavailable to the kids. And so what you did was so incredibly important. And I wanted to thank you for that as a person who knew that area really well. That was something that was very needed. Thank you.
Sure.
Wendy.
Hi, Nina.
Hello, Wendy.
Being a musician myself, I'm a violinist, played under many, many conductors, and a lot of them are friends. And I noticed that they all practice a lot, either in front of a mirror.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes. So I'm just curious to know if your father would practice his scores at home, or you just read them and that's it.
Definitely no mirror work. But yeah, he would sit at his desk with the score and he would mark it. He had these 2-sided pencils. One was red and the other was blue. The reddy blueies, he would mark red for bowings and other notes for the orchestra, and blue for himself. So tempo markings and other things, I forget what. But definitely no actual movements. That all just came spontaneously.
And did he conduct a lot without music?
Oh, you mean without a score?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. The War Horses, that was in the can. Ligeti, not so much.
Thank you.
We have a comment from Robert Kent. Your father introduced me to classical music with the young people's concerts on TV. I am forever grateful to him.
You and a million trillion other people. It really galvanized a whole generation of people to either become musicians or become music lovers. I know that Joshua Bell is one of them, and so many others. It was groundbreaking. And you know that the young people's concerts actually already existed. He didn't make them up. It was his idea to put them on TV. So it was no longer just for well-heeled New York kids. It was for everybody. That was the big idea.
I have Ron who wants to ask a question. Go ahead, Ron.
Nina, this might be an odd question, but I'm just thinking my own life. With all that's going on in your dad's life, did he have any little hobbies or little things that he enjoyed doing, or odd things, or collecting, or whatever?
No. He liked to play squash. He liked to play tennis. He loved skiing.
Huh.
Vigorous swim in the ocean. But hobbies, I don't, no collecting or anything like that.
Just curious, thanks.
Jay.
What did your dad think was his greatest success, and what do you think was his greatest disappointment?
Oh, I know the answer to the second one for sure. He really felt that his work as a composer, West Side Story apart, was not as well received as he would have liked. I think he'd be gratified that his pieces are performed as often as they are. I wish he could see that. And he didn't talk much about his successes. I don't remember that. Not overtly anyway. You know, sometimes he would, after a concert, he would say, wow, I don't know where I went, but I was writing that piece as I conducted it. You know, something like that.
Great. And it's clear that you loved your dad very much.
Very, 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 very much. Ooh, is that a hound? Is that a hound dog?
I don't know whose dog it is.
Not my dog.
Not ours.
I think that's all of the questions. Irma, anything from you? You're muted.
Okay. I am sure, Nina, that I am speaking for everyone who is here today. We cannot thank you enough for coming to visit us. And I just sort of think that you are the dessert at the end of a sumptuous 13-hour Leonard Bernstein feast that my class
Wow,
enjoyed.
what a marathon.
We did a lot of studying, and by the way, we spent one whole session on Candide almost, and a whole session on the Mass, and a whole session on West Side Story, and people got to hear his little a little bit of the gourmet, the French. I just blanked out.
Oh, La Bonne Cuisine.
La Bonne Cuisine,
So
and
much
a little
fun.
bit of I Hate Music. So they got to see all aspects of your dad's personality, and everyone just loved meeting him and meeting you. So thank you so much.
This was really fun, and I'm lovely. It was lovely to meet you all. Have a great Thanksgiving.